I'm Indy Nidell. Welcome to a Great War special episode about Austro-Hungarian pistols of the First World War.
Getting into pistols, I should probably start with the Rast Gasser. So let me pull this guy out. This is a Austro-Hungarian revolver, and I'm probably gonna have to zoom in on it for you guys to really see it at all. Yeah, the Rast Gasser is going to be fairly unique among revolvers just because of its 8-shot capacity. This uses a 8mm Rast Gasser cartridge, which is actually very, very similar to that 8mm French revolver cartridge we were talking about, French ordnance. So really about the same ballistic properties. You're looking at kind of the power of a modern 380-ish. That's the ballpark. Anyway, this gun is a gate loader, so you would take it up in your left hand like we talked about for cavalry. You would open the gate on the right. Now it has what's called the Athais system. The Athais system is that it disconnects the hammer and blocks it. So now we can pull the trigger and the cylinder will rotate without activating the hammer. So we can load a cartridge, click, load a cartridge, click. If we want to unload the gun when we're done firing, it's the same thing. We have a spring-activated push rod here. So I would click, push, and you can get quite handy with it when you're not trying to show it to a camera. So 8 rounds, pretty good capacity for a revolver, fairly reliable system. And unique to this is, well, not completely unique to this, but it has a very easy disassembly system. I can pull a rod here, twist and pull, and the whole cylinder comes out. I don't really need to do that for you guys today, but I wouldn't mind showing you the internals. So if I pull down the trigger guard and flip open this guy and pull this piece of wood out of the way, that's it. That's the whole thing.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
So she's a double single action, which means I can either manually cock that hammer back and then pull the trigger, or I can pull the trigger all the way. Here, let me get this trigger guard out of the way. Actually, it'll slip right out. I can just pull that trigger and it'll activate the hammer, or I can manually cock that hammer back and then release it with that trigger. The other unique thing about this revolver compared to some others is that it does not have a firing pin on the hammer. It's actually set down in the frame so that the hammer strikes that firing pin just like you would on a hammer-fired pistol. Fairly unique, started in 1898. These meant to be replaced several times over, but would end up being produced all the way to 1919 because they just couldn't get off them. They were being made in Vienna. They were designed by August Rast. They were produced by Gasser. Since it was external to the whole current complex, it was easy to keep these things rolling off the assembly line, so they did all the way through the war. It's just another one of those old legacy guns that just stayed in service because it worked, and it worked well. So plenty of these in the Austro-Hungarian Empire during the war. So we get into automatics. The Austro-Hungarians really embraced automatics fairly early. So there's a number of designs to look at. The first is not actually a quote-unquote military pistol for the Austro-Hungarians because it was never officially adopted. It's the Mannlicher 1905. So this was produced, there's actually a 1901 and a 1905 version. They're very similar. This gun was sold commercially. It would be adopted by external militaries, particularly Argentina, but in Austria-Hungary, it just didn't quite make the trials. However, it was a very popular private purchase, so plenty of these would have turned up on the battlefield. If we zoom in, we can get a closer look at its unique features. If we take a look, it's got a really unique profile. And the big part of this is a pistol from back when one-handed shooting was still popular. So, even though it's sort of arched forward, it's designed for me to point almost like a fencing saber. Just keep that in mind. I'm supposed to point down the length of my body with a slight kind of, arm lock. Look at how that kind of drops my angle. So it works out, it looks so awkward, but when you're actually holding it, and I'm sorry you all can't hold it right now, it feels right for one-handed shooting. For two-handed shooting like we're used to nowadays, it's terrible. But this gun is a semi-automatic stripper clip fed pistol, actually. So if I draw this to the rear, we would feed it from either an 8 or 10 round clip, depending on which model we had, because there are some variations. But literally we would set the stripper clip and strip rounds in. They remain in the gun. The stripper clip gets thrown to the side. So just like the Gewehr 98. So this gun is what's known as a delayed blowback or a retarded blowback. It doesn't have a locking action. Instead, the weight of the springs keep it shut a little bit longer while you're firing. That weight is increased by a small cam set down inside that adds additional pressure to the hammer spring so that the hammer itself will resist the rearward motion of the slide. A lot of people consider that of dubious merit, but it handles a pretty good cartridge. The 7.63 Mannlicher cartridge, here I'll strip one off for you guys. 7.63 Mannlicher, this cartridge is pretty much proprietary to this gun. It was never really standard issue for anybody other than Argentina, but decent little cartridge, decent power, and a decent capacity. And it's a very, very early semi-automatic. You're talking about 1901 to 1905 are all the big variations of this gun. Again, popular private purchase, still not really an official arm. Handy little thing. So this is a big name, big design in terms of the Austro-Hungarian consciousness. It has a lot of principles we're going to see on other guns that did get adopted by the military. So it was really worth mentioning because it was in the trenches and it was influential. So setting it aside, we're going to get into an actual issued pistol, the 07 Roth-Steyr. And again, we're going to have to zoom in because these are quite small. All right, looking at the Roth-Steyr, I should probably show you the other side. It's got a little bit more going on. This is sort of misnamed. It was developed by Karl Krinka, who then sold the patent to George Roth, who then licensed it to Steyr, which is how we end up with Roth-Steyr. Poor Krinka got written out of the history, I guess. This gun's very unique in that it has a rotating lock breech. So when we fire, our barrel and bolt travel rearward together for a little bit, and then our barrel sort of twists out of the way, and we're left with the bolt returning on its own and coming back forward. We're going to do a video that has a nice animation for this that gets into the details so they don't have to strip this on air. It is a bit like a Nerf gun to a lot of people because it is a cocking bolt like the Nambu's. I gotta let that follow her down. There we go. So there she's cocked. Another interesting thing is this was intended for cavalry initially. It would later be sort of fielded a little bit wider, but it never became a universal officer's pistol. If you can see that rear of the firing pin sticking out right here, can you guys make that out?
Yeah.
Okay. When I start to pull the trigger, you'll see it moving rearward. If I put my thumb on it, it'll help you see it. See it kind of popping back? That was requested by the cavalry because they didn't like the single action light release. They wanted the feel of a double action. So it's sort of a hybrid single double action striker fired pistol, which is that I pull, it cocks it a bit further, and then, and I'm gonna have to take this to the side for a second because I don't wanna just dry fire it because that wire it out. There we go. Then it releases it all the way down. So see, she's disappeared because she's actually fired the pistol now. So just a unique little feature that it's got a heavier double action style pull that recocks that firing pin a bit more so that the cavalry felt like they weren't accidentally setting off the pistol when they didn't mean to, because at that time, people seemed to walk around with their fingers on the trigger all the time. I really don't know why, but it's not until much later that you get this idea of just keep your finger away from that trigger. I mean, look at old military photos. Everybody's got their finger right there all the time. But this, again, is a stripper clip fed pistol. So same as before. Actually, this one has a little tab at the top to help you with it. But it's the same thing. You pull her to the rear, you line up your stripper clip, and then you strip them off into the gun. They stay in the gun, you throw the clip off to the side. But yeah, pretty straightforward. Austro-Hungarian also obviously really loves stripper clip technology for their pistols, end block clip technology for their rifles. Sort of an odd pairing, but hey, it works. These guys would serve through the war. Obviously, they use their own cartridge, which is actually here, which is 8mm Roth-Steyr. And you're going to start to see that we're having some issues with logistics because we have commercially bought 7.63 Mannlicher pistols. We have military 8mm Roths. We're going to see a 9mm, a 32 Frommer, and we're going to see a 32. We're getting into a lot of different cartridges, so keep that in mind. Every gun I'm going to show you is using a different cartridge from here on out.
That's crazy, though.
The thing is, the Austrians really seem to allow industry to make their picks to the point that they didn't force them to standardize on a round. They would just tailor the round to the gun. By all accounts, these would serve pretty well. They're fairly robust. They're a little bit thick for a one-handed shooter because that's, again, you're supposed to be shooting one-handed back then. Two-handed feels pretty good, though. We're going to have a video up on our channel about these soon enough. All right, next up is going to be one of my favorite pistols, the Steyr-Hahn. This is considered the model 1912. The gun was developed in 1911, but that's when we see adoptions by Romania. It would serve with Romania through the war, but also Austria-Hungary would come around just a few years later to pick it up for their inventory. This is a fantastic pistol. We should probably zoom in so we can get a look at it. Ta-da! The Steyr-Hahn is one of my favorites. I don't know why, I just really like it. It's designed around the idea of a cavalry pistol again, however it would get broader use than the old Roth-Steyr. If I flip her around, you can see a little bit more of the controls going on here. This again is going to be a clip-fed pistol. I'm actually shy of rounds because we were out shooting this one already. It uses a proprietary 9mm Steyr. As a matter of fact, the action on this is so strong that it would go on to be rechambered in 9mm Parabellum because they were retained by Austria until they were absorbed by Germany. So Germany made the decision to go ahead and keep the gun around because, hey, it was pretty reliable other than being an irritating stripper clip fed system instead of a detachable box magazine. So, again, there's the cartridge. Not too bad. We're getting up to a nice military cartridge here. Now, this gun is fairly unique in that it's often attributed to Krinka. It uses Krinka's rotating barrel, the same rotating barrel system that we saw on the Roth. So let me get that guy out. They both use rotating barrel locks. The difference is pretty astounding, though, because this is way over-engineered by comparison. The Steyr-Hahn is very simple. It just has the helical cuts in the receiver. The barrel has some lugs on it. It spins, unlocks the action. It's terrific. It's also a hammer fire, like the Mannlicher. As a matter of fact, if we look, you can kind of tell, especially up here, we've borrowed some styling from the Mannlicher. So now we've got sort of the rear clip bridge and sight from the Mannlicher. This switch here on the Mannlicher depresses the interrupter and allows you to empty the gun early. The Steyr-Hahn also has that feature, and as a matter of fact, on the earlier prototype photos, it looks almost identical to the one off the Mannlicher. It's very clear that some of the styling and features came from the Mannlicher. It's obvious the locking action came from the Roth-Steyr, and there's a gun which is the Colt 1902, which has a frame and slide lock almost identical to this system. It is very clear, especially with the way the flat springs inside work with the hammer, that this was derived from the Colt 1902, the Roth-Steyr, and the Mannlicher 1905. It's sort of a hybrid gun. So I tend to lend a little bit of credit to the idea that it's sort of a commission pistol, like we saw with the Gavar 88 that merged a whole bunch of available features. But this is a hammer fire pistol. So it's only single action rather. And the interesting thing is we have a safety on this side, and because of the emphasis on cavalry, there was a fear that you would lock up your safety and then draw it to fire and find your hammer locked. So the safety actually disconnects automatically when we cock the hammer.
Oh, okay.
Cool.
But again, slide operated, stripper clip fed, no detachable magazine, and this gun looks so much like a modern pistol. I love handing it to people at the range, watching them try to disconnect the magazine because it won't.
Because they won't.
Yep. The other thing that's interesting is the follower holds this gun to the rear, so if you have nothing in it and you want to let the slide forward, you release the lever on the other side here to depress the depress the interrupter, which also tugs the follower down. That lets the slide forward. We have a video, it's our first 10 episodes video, where I managed to spray myself in the face with this gun because out of habit of handling it empty, I depressed the interrupter release instead of releasing the safety I had locked on, and that instantly dumped the magazine into my face. Oh, man. So, terrific gun, a little bit complicated that you have two levers to keep track of, but hey, it's a wonderful shooter, pretty good powered cartridge, and fantastic for its time period. Now we're going to move into Hungary. You see, Hungarian national pride is rising. They've got their own factory for the rifles, but now they want some of their own designs. And so we have Rudolf Frommer, who has been working on pistols since the turn of the century. He has a design that's been evolving over the years, and it looks kind of awkward by 1910, but by 1911, 1912, it's settling into a handy little pocket pistol. That is the Frommer Stop. And we're going to have to zoom in on this because you can tell he's very small. Frommer really liked long recoil systems. We actually see these in the Browning Auto 5s and the Shosha and things like that. This is a system in which the barrel and the bolt recoil all the way to the rear together. So if I draw this back, we're just pulling the bolt back, but when fired, you can see how the whole thing's recoiling. It would go all the way back, which I can't do without breaking my finger here, but it would be driven all the way back, they would lock rearward, and then the barrel would come forward, and then the bolt would come forward. That's long recoil. So it's kind of hard to drive a long recoil system in a pistol. It's not a very successful pistol system, but Frommer managed to get it to work on this guy. It uses 765 Frommer, which is a 32 ACP cartridge. I mean, it's identical to 32 ACP, but it's loaded hotter. As a matter of fact, that's what we had to do to shoot our video for this, is hot load 32 ACP. Because it's a stronger locking action, it could handle it. So it is a lock breech pistol, but it fires a hot loaded small cartridge. This has a grip safety and no other manual safety, so it cannot be fired unless you grip and then pull that trigger, and I don't want to dry fire this, so I'll let that hammer down. She's a hammer fire, and you can tell she's got some beautiful lock work on here. It's a fairly complicated little system. There's 2 sets of springs in this overtop channel. It's honestly ridiculously complicated for such a small handgun. But on the plus side, it's a heel release, and I'm sorry, it's stiff, magazine fed pistol. This is getting to what we're used to. So the Hungarians rather like this design. They adopt it for their own personal home guard army, and they love it quite a bit. By the way, it doesn't have an official model number until after the war. It was literally just called the Stop. They were borrowing the English word to sort of sell the idea that it will stop your opponent. This is a beautifully compact pistol, and you know, if it weren't for the fact that it was a hot loaded cartridge, it's really more of a police pistol at the time than a military one. I guess they managed to just convince everybody that the hotter loaded 32 was somehow worth it as a military round. Although, again, fairly reliable, fairly easy to use, simple grip safety, magazine fed, This is a terrifically modern handgun for that time. It's just over-engineered and expensive to make. I honestly think a lot of its adoption had to do with national pride. Now, because of this pistol, the Austrians kind of go, whoa, 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 we want a 32 pistol.
Me too, me too.
So they reach for this. Now this is the Steyr-Pieper 1909. Some people will call this the 1908, but I trust my Austrian book on it, and they're saying that both this and a 25 ACP version were both made in 1909. You just have to differentiate them from caliber, not by year. Let's zoom in though, because she's awfully small, as you can tell. This is actually a pistol designed by a Belgian man named Jan Warnen. He was very important in revolver technology. He invented the rebounding hammer. But he sold his patents to Nicholas Pieper, son of the famous Henry Pieper. Nicholas Pieper licensed them to Steyr, so now it's the Steyr-Pieper. Yet again, just like with Krinka, we have the inventor sort of written out of history. But this was sold commercially. This is really not meant to be a military pistol. It's just that Steyr produced these for commercial sale. They loaded up on them and then stopped production with a bunch of inventory so they could sell them out slowly piecemeal. And then sort of, 1913 hits and the Austrians start looking around for 32. They have a bunch of inventory. They buy up a stack. World War I hits. They buy up even more. So none were made for the war itself. It's just that they were sitting in a warehouse ready to go. Now this one's technically a commercial model because it does not have a lanyard ring, which would have been situated right here. All they did is they milled out under the grip and set a little ring in there. That's it. That's all they did to make the military. Otherwise it's identical. So it's a unique pistol in that it uses a tipping barrel. Dun-dun-dun. And it has no extractor or ejector. So what you would do is you would load up your magazine, which again is a detachable box mag. So we'd load up our magazine, slap it in the pistol. On a normal slide operated pistol, we would have to work the slide to chamber the first round. But this one, in order to have a more powerful spring, yada, 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 they went ahead and had a tipping barrel so that you don't have to fight the spring in the action. It's good for people with weak hands, that sort of thing. You just take your first round, drop it in the chamber, and then close her up. There's no extractor in this system, like I said, so there's nothing actively pulling the case out. It uses extra sort of gas blowback force to just go ahead and drive that spent casing out. That would prove to be a weakness for this, along with some other things I'm going to talk about in just a moment. This gun, weirdly, being set up to sort of, and by the way, there's a big lever on the side that I'm hitting to do that. Weirdly, it's set up like you would never realistically have to operate this slide unless you had some sort of jam. And even then, it's not like you have an extractor to help clear the jam. So basically, when this pistol jams, it becomes a complete pain in the butt to work with. So you would think that this spring, which by the way is fitted over the barrel, and there's a hook here that engages the slide when we close it so that now the spring is working. You would think that that spring would be extremely strong to help because it's a blowback pistol. There's no locking action, so the strength of the spring and the weight of the slide, and you can tell it's a very small slide, those two things are going to be what resists that 32 ACP cartridge when we fire it. It's a fairly weak spring as well. So despite its size and its small cartridge and its beautiful grip, this thing is kind of a pain to shoot. It's got really high recoil. It's hard to get follow-up shots, and it sort of bludgeons itself to death. As a matter of fact, when we took this one out to fire for the show, we broke 2 firing pins just trying to keep her running on the range because it's self-destructive to a certain degree. As a matter of fact, after the war, the Austrians trying to keep these in police use would redesign them and rework them. It's called the 34. They have a huge slide at that point with an extractor and other proper fittings like it should have had to begin with because the dang things were cracking themselves apart. So a reasonably good pistol, not the most reliable just because it had a tendency to beat itself to death, and it would beat your hand to death too. One other weird thing about this, which is kind of annoying, it's a heel release on the bottom. If you look carefully, and I'm sorry it's going to be hard to see until we edit, there's 2 notches on this magazine. That's because being a commercial pistol, it was designed for pleasure shooting as well. If you push this into the first click, it acts as a magazine disconnect. so that you can load one round and fire it, and then load one round and then fire it, and not have to engage the magazine. Which sounds like you could just ignore it, but the problem is, being a heel release, you often catch, when you're trying to pull her out, you often catch that second lip, and then you have to yank and hit the button again. It's just another thing to fiddle with. Really not the best choice in terms of a military pistol. This is probably the weakest thing in the Austrian inventory at that moment, but still a fantastically interesting piece to see.
If you'd like to see our episode about German handguns from the First World War, you can click right here. And you should definitely check out Othais' channel C&Rsenal to see videos about all of these weapons from the First World War in action. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. See you next time.